Hey, everybody, this is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs, founders, and operators, as well as investors about all things value creation and startups. Today, I am talking with Elizabeth Brooks, who is the managing partner of Better Angels, which is a high-performance syndicate of C-level investors providing guidance to early-stage companies. Currently, she's also the CMO for BSE Global, which represents marketing efforts for really large brands, impressive brands, including the Brooklyn Nets, Barclays Center, among many others. And also before that, she was the board member and CMO of Lucid, which just had a $1 billion exit. Was it this year or was it last year?
It was last year, right at the crux. December 27th, I think was the actual date. So just in time for 2022 to round the corner.
Yeah, perfect timing. Perfect timing. So Elizabeth, so great to have you on the show. I would love to just do a little background on yourself and just to kind of see how you got to where you are.
Sure. Really quick, I actually started my career in an unusual way for an investor. I started my career as a club DJ. Was the best job I could get when I was in school. Got to stay out all night, paid better than scooping at the local ice cream store. And I guess I was decent at mixing. So that's what I did. And from that job evolved a job at a record label doing A&R, which is technically stands for artists and repertoire. Some of us say that it stands for airplanes and restaurants, but it involves A&R involves the finding of artists, the creation of records, the sort of overall management of the record making process, and then the marketing of that artist to the person who's going to find their music, hopefully life changing. So it's a really interesting career from an investor standpoint and from a marketer standpoint. It's a really interesting place to start because you are constantly looking for the next exciting thing. You are, out in experiencing different cultures. It's very lively. It's constantly changing. It's never really the same. And at a certain point, when I started doing this, I was basically a talent scout. I was quite young. I was a teenager, and I love music. It's a passion of mine. I love it more than anything. And I still love all kinds of music. And in fact, I still DJ, and I love the impact that music has on culture and, how tribal it is and how passionately people identify with their favorite artist. And I found that insanely compelling. But there came a point where I actually felt that what was going to change people's relationship to entertainment and people's relationship to society and people's relationship to how they bought things and how they experienced things and how they lived their life. I felt that what was really going to change that was actually not the next band or the next singer, but technology and the advent of the internet. And so I literally sent a cold note to a tiny startup in San Mateo, California called Napster and asked them if they needed somebody who understood the music business to come work there. And I think when I joined Napster, I was employee number 6 or 7. I think it was number 6. So it was an extraordinarily nascent company, under 1 million users, and we would grow to have 70 million users within the next 6 months. Fastest growing internet application in history. So that was a crazy ride. And what it did for me, I was their head of marketing, first and only, and it catapulted me into a career in high tech marketing. And so I moved on from there. I worked at buy.com, one of the e-commerce leaders, later sold to Rakuten. I worked at a company called Real D, which creates the market dominating 3D cinema technology that you'll see if you go to a theater and see a movie in 3D. So at that time, a revolutionary digital technology. I did digital marketing for EMI Music. I did consumer marketing for Electronic Arts, the gaming company. I was the head of content and marketing at Live Nation Entertainment, which is the world's largest concert promoter and owner of music venues. And then I joined Lucid, which you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. And Lucid is the leader and really the global market share holder of the programmatic marketplace for market research sample. And that's a super dorky, a little bit like inside baseball kind of a business. But the easy way to explain what Lucid does is that if you are a business doing market research, which almost every brand does, and you need a certain kind of person to answer a survey, let's say you're looking for 10,000 men between 18 and 34 who own dogs. It used to be a manual process. You would email and call the various sample providers to get these people to talk to you and give you the consumer insights that you needed. And what Lucid did, in much the same way that DoubleClick revolutionized the placement of digital advertising, Lucid created a programmatic marketplace so that you could just say, these are the people that I need insights from. And Lucid would go forth as a piece of software and find those people for you and do the matching. This created a sea change in the world of market research and is what led to Lucid's eventual sale to Cint AB, which is a company in a very similar corner of the business. Lucid was an extraordinary journey. I named the company, I did rebranding, I stood up a functioning marketing org, and then I joined a company that you know well, Soper's Capital Associates, as an executive in residence and functioned as chief marketing officer and chief strategy officer across a number of their portfolio companies, primarily in business to business software as a service. That was incredible. I got lured away at a certain point. I was moving back from Los Angeles to New York City, and the Brooklyn Nets NBA team were looking for a chief marketing officer. And there are some jobs that you just don't say no to, and that was one of them. So I ran marketing for the Nets and for Barclays Center, the 18,000 seat arena in Brooklyn that is the home for the Nets, as well as a plethora of associated brands for a couple years. And when we sold Lucid, and the pandemic hit, and life was a bit crazy, I think, for all of us. I saw an opportunity to do early investment differently. I had been an active angel investor. I had worked with a number of young companies. I'd worked at a number of young companies and with some amazing VCs and amazing private equity people. And I saw an opportunity to work with extraordinary founders and extraordinary young companies in a really powerful and value-added and slightly non-traditional way. And that's when I launched Better Angels Ventures.
Awesome. And I want to go into Better Angels, but there's some things I definitely want to unpack here. One was like the correlation between entrepreneurship in the media side and the entrepreneurship journey on the software side. I had a guy on our podcast who was a founder, and he said it was very, very similar, like a lot of the same feelings, going out, trying out your product, iterating, trying to raise money. I mean, were you seeing the same kinds of things?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I say when people talk to me about, B2B businesses versus B2C businesses, I always say, the person on the other end is still a human being. So in a way, it's always B2C. And so taking out a media product and taking out a company, they're similar because you're going to be testing a market. You're going to be watching your audience's response. So yes, there's definitely a corollary there. I think that they are more similar than they are different.
Awesome. And you probably get this question all the time. What was it like working with Sean Parker?
Sean is amazing. Sean's quite extraordinary. Both Sean Parker and Sean Fanning were co-founders of Napster. And I actually worked a lot more closely with Sean Fanning, but they're both quite different. They're both brilliant. They've both gone on, obviously, to do extraordinary things in the world of entrepreneurship. Yeah, we were all kids, so it was a very different time. It was a very different time. I have fond memories of Sean Parker and myself riding around in Sean Fanning's Trans Am, trying to fit ourselves both into the back seat.
That's awesome.
I don't know that a lot of people, because people who think about Napster, they know it maybe from The Social Network or the film The Social Network, or late stage media coverage or shows like Silicon Valley and a very televised interpretation of what Silicon Valley was like in like 1999, 2000, 2001, when we were all, 18, 20, 21 and starry-eyed, and it was a lot less glamorous. It was
Right.
just as much fun as it's portrayed, but in a very different way. Nobody was calling for Appletinis or, snorting coke off of somebody's belly, or it was not that. We were working incredibly hard, riding a rocket ship, trying to figure out where it would go while we were flying it, literally. And it wasn't glamorous. The first Napster office was two completely disconnected rooms on the second floor of a bank building in downtown San Mateo, California. And the reason they were disconnected was simply because there was no real estate available and we couldn't afford offices that had rooms connected to each other.
Hmm.
So you would walk down the hall and kind of make a turn to get to the server room. And in between one room and the other, there were, 15 other startups also, as much on a mission as we were. So it was a very exciting time, a very heady time. Maybe one out of 1,000 companies that launched at that time survived, but it was different, I think, than the media portrayal that has evolved over the last 20 years.
I remember using the product. I loved it back in high
Oh, it was
school.
incredible.
Just being able to have any song you wanted. And sometimes you'd click on a song and it wasn't the song you wanted, but it was just somebody else who uploaded it and called it something else. But it was a super, super cool product, and it completely disrupted the music industry.
People had never had access to music like that, and streaming services being as advanced as they are today, I think it would be hard for somebody who's grown up with Spotify and so forth, and Apple Music to and YouTube Music, to understand that in 1999, before the advent of Napster, if you wanted to discover new music, you you were going to find it through maybe the very limited playlist on your local top 40 radio station, which was more of a top 20 radio station. You might get lucky and have a great independent record store in your town, but if you didn't, you were limited to the very small selection of, again, big hits that were stocked at the mall record store in your local town. There were a few music magazines, and they were great and they worked very hard, but it was still a very controlled kind of limited drip of musics that people were exposed to. And having the smorgasbord of the world's music laid out at your feet the way that they were, as soon as you connected to Napster. And we had people connecting to Napster on dial-ups, right? Like, you can
Hmm.
imagine that sound that I think we've all forgotten and want to forget, that whining sound. But the minute that you connected, pretty much anything that you wanted to listen to or had wanted to listen to was available to you. And that sense of access, which is fundamental to the internet and which we take completely for granted now, that
Correct.
was a revolution. It was
Correct.
absolutely revolutionary at the time, and that's why everybody fell in love with it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that was definitely the crux of immediacy, and I want it now, and people getting it now. It was absolutely
Exactly. And the
incredible.
digital consumer, and the fact that at that time maybe businesses, well, certainly businesses did not understand that the digital consumer wants it now, and wants it in the way that they want to access it. So the relationship between business and consumers was changing very, very rapidly, from we will give you this in the way that we think we want to give you this, to no, I'm going to experience and access this conveniently in the way that I want to as a customer. And now, especially, direct to consumer businesses are completely customer driven, but that was not the case at the time. So the whole digital revolution, it's almost shocking that it was, I mean, it was 20 years ago, but it's not that long, and it has changed things so much. It has changed life on this planet so much.
So you started working with Sopris while still being involved with Lucid, if I remember correctly.
Yes, Sopris was the existing, they were the first institutional non-VC investor into Lucid. So yeah, we, as you know, an interim CMO at Lucid and as an investor, because I invested quite a bit of my own capital into Lucid, I worked really closely with Sopris.
Sure. And so what was that like being jumping into the portfolio of a family office like that and working with companies, some in different stages, right? Early stage, later stage, working with founders, working with hired guns. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
It was amazing, and it was quite intoxicating from a business standpoint, a creativity standpoint, because I was working across, I think, to start with, 6 portfolio companies, and they were in different stages and they were in different industries, which is one of the things that I like about investment. You're never bored. You're
Mm-hmm.
in one business one moment, like we'd be working in real estate CRM, and then we'd be in legal software, and then we'd be in something that was dealing more with housing. And so it was a never dull, very, very early stage companies. And that, from my perspective, offered the opportunity to really not reinvent, but to invent a way of doing business that was efficient, capital efficient, time efficient, personnel efficient. Things like none of the companies had a Salesforce instance stood up. So we were able to stand up a Salesforce dashboard across all of Sopris's portfolio companies, which then gives the partners the ability to see how each company is performing from a sales standpoint, and allows the individual portfolio companies to have the benefits of a robust CRM and to start really managing their sales in a professional manner. We stood up a very robust content marketing initiative with everything from copywriters to a landing page strategy to really like well crafted specific messaging for each company. And we were able to again make that capital efficient because it was spread out across a bunch of portfolio companies. So I think this is the kind of value that a great family office, a great PE firm, a great venture firm, or even a great group of angels can offer to their companies, is this kind of learning and experience and strategy, and just shared, like, let's take what we've all learned, the good things and the bad things, right, through the school of hard knocks that is doing these jobs for a while. Let's take that and see if we can make life better for our portfolio companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a business domain perspective, marketing is so difficult in early stage companies. You have so many different levers to pull and so many different personas to make marketing successful. You have the strategist, you have the execution person, you have the copy person, you have the performance-driven marketing person, and to get everybody under the same roof functioning in an early stage company that's limited on budget is super difficult. And software is reliant very heavily on marketing, and people buy software with their eyes. So how do you think about that, working with early stage companies that might not have the benefit of a shared resource like Sopris did?
It is massively challenging, and I think one of the very first lessons of marketing in an early stage company is that you are going to have to pick your battles. You're going to have to choose where you lean in with your resources and where you're going to wait until you have the resources to do that piece. Early stage companies are unlikely to do huge splashy brand activations. Sometimes they do, but
Mm-hmm.
I would rarely advise it as a first strategy. Crafting the messaging, the positioning, and figuring out where your customer is and going and getting them. That's, jobs 1, 2, and 3, right? Not necessarily in that order, but it requires a lot of practicality, and it requires making what can be difficult choices.
Yeah, and then for somebody that who doesn't have a marketing background, how does a founder really try to establish themselves in market positioning, because I think that's just so important in a slew where you're combating either vertical solutions or horizontal solutions. Where do you fit? And how do you know that your messaging really works?
One of the interesting things is, and I say this to founders a lot, but generally founders have a very good and very strong sense of brand. They might not know it. They might know it, but they might not know it. But because if you've founded a company, if you've identified a space in a market that you're going to take, and you've crafted something to occupy that space, and you've thought about the market that you're going to address and who your customer is going to be, and you've then gone out and gotten funding by meeting with investors and pitching your company over and over and saying, this is the crux of what we do, this is who we are at our core, and this is why we matter. Well, then you've identified your brand. You've just done the initial positioning and the most essential part of brand work, which is the why and the who. Why are you and who are you? And so I like to talk to founders when I'm doing brand work with them, and usually the brand essence will come out in that conversation, even if it does not require decades of marketing experience to understand your brand, because you created a company. You actually really know, you do know what it is. You know a lot more than you think about what the company is, how to go out and find that audience, and how to effectively sell to them, and how to move the market, right? How to address your competition, how to map that out. That gets more complex, and that requires specific domain knowledge. But the beginning of finding your marketing path, I think that early stage entrepreneurs know a lot more than I hear them tell me they do.
Awesome. No, that's really good, because there's obviously passion, right, for what they're doing. And
exactly.
if they have passion for what they're doing and the problems they're solving, it's there. You just have to get the words out.
Absolutely, because you don't go into, you don't become a startup entrepreneur because it's an easy, cushy path to take. You don't do it for a comfortable, simple lifestyle. You don't do it to punch in your hours and go home at the assigned time. It's a challenge. It's extraordinarily difficult. So you've chosen it for a reason, and you have a passion, you have something driving you forward, and that is going to be the source of what your brand is about and what your offering is to your chosen market.
Awesome. So Better Angels, when did that come about? Tell us what that is.
So I had been doing angel investing on and off for, well, pretty much forever, since I first dipped my toe into Silicon Valley. I had worked with a lot of VCs at companies where I was a C-level executive. I had worked with quite a few angels. I had been fortunate enough to be successful with my investment into Lucid, with my investment into RealD. So I'd seen an IPO with RealD, and I just felt that there was a way to do a different kind of early stage investing. Some of this was because my background is so different to the average investor. I don't come from a finance background or a Wall Street background. I came up in startups, but I didn't come up on the revenue path specifically. I didn't come up on the CEO path. I came up on the marketing path. And I find, the question that you just asked me, companies feel very kind of lost in at sea in terms of marketing. And I have found over the years that I've been able to help the companies that I've invested in. And I thought, well, if I can be a value add in this way, I know other people who have other skill sets who can be a value add in different ways. And so a group of friends came together to form Better Angels. And our mission is very much to be better angels.
Perfect. Look at that positioning. Yeah, that's incredible positioning. right
It
there.
was, the company name did kind of write itself. But in all seriousness, there are a number of traditional fund models, and they're all incredibly valid. From, a traditional venture fund with general partners and then limited partners, and you, as the GP, or a managing partner like I am, you go and you find the opportunities and you do a capital call and assign the investments there. There are rolling funds, there are co-investment funds, and Better Angels is more like a co-investment model than it is like anything else. We don't syndicate out to, the public. We don't syndicate to people that we don't know per se, although we're always looking to make new friends and meet new people who are interested in investing alongside us. But what we do is we identify investment opportunities, and then we look at the group of incredible, talented, experienced, ethical, helpful, good folks, that we are so lucky to be surrounded with. And we say, who would be a value add to this company? Who would get this opportunity, and who would be helpful in getting this new co to where it and its founders want it to be? And then we put that investment thesis and that investment community together, and we make an investment. So it is syndication, but it's a different approach to syndication than most of what I see out there.
Yeah, it's more of a invite only, exclusive, tight knit type of syndication.
Exclusive is a word I would hate to use, because we do have a mission to change the face of investing and to change the face of who gets capital in this world. So, we work very, very hard to identify underrepresented founders.
Well, exclusive on the investor side, like on who
Even
can
on the
invest with you.
investor side, yeah, even on the investor side, I would say the only exclusivity is, have we worked alongside you before, or do we think that we would like to work alongside you? Because changing the face of the investor community, to me, is what's going to help us change where capital goes. So having more women in our network, having more people of color in our network, having more underrepresented identities of all kinds, having more older people in our network, all of these things are super important to us. So we want to change the face of early stage and late stage, for that matter, investment from both sides, from whom we invest in and who's investing alongside us. But yeah, of course, we want to know you, because it's almost a matchmaking process to a certain extent. Who's going to really get this company, and who's going to lean in and be part of what is always a Herculean effort, getting a company off of the ground and getting a company from seed to A to B to C, and eventually to exit, or to operating as a sustainable, incredible business forever, which is, that's an exit in itself.
Do you ever feel this way? Because I do. Companies that you see an opportunity to help, where you can add value, do you feel more of a proclivity or selection bias to pick those companies versus companies that might not need your help?
I think it's possible. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all have selection bias.
Sure. Because I'm just
And we
wondering,
all want to feel valuable. We all,
right.
it's human. We all want to feel valuable. So yes, like if I think I'm going to make a difference, am I a little bit more inclined? Yes. Although, if I think that if I just think you have a slam dunk killer idea, and all I can do is stand on the sidelines and cheer you on, I'm certainly not going to say no to that one either.
Yeah, I like those. Yeah,
those are great. I don't care if we can find some more of those. That would be unbelievable. But
I like the board meetings where I bring in lunch, where I just really form as a caterer. That's how my value add.
If the hardest question is, do you want the tuna salad or the
Right.
or the portobello mushroom. That's if that's the hardest question that you face at a board meeting, you're in a really good spot. No, I mean, I do look, I invest all the time in companies where I personally may not be incredibly helpful today. I might be later, right?
Mm-hmm.
The company evolves. The company gets to the point where they would hire a vice president of marketing or a CMO, or they're facing strategic questions, or they're walking into an area of business that I have great familiarity with. But I will have somebody in my investment group, someone alongside me who is of great value now, and I definitely do those investments every day of the week. I have an investment in an incredible, well, you're the company that we're co-invested in,
Mm-hmm.
Datum. I don't know that I have experience in transmuting a marketplace company from a primarily services model to a primarily software model. So in that sense, yes, I think that I can be helpful to where they are. But my investment group there is also full of people for whom software development is their 100%, 10,000%, 10 million% core competency. And they can be helpful now, like
Mm-hmm.
12:30 p.m. Eastern time today. They can be helpful
Right,
to
which is
that
nice.
company. Yeah, and by bringing them into the orbit, then I have done part of my job as managing partner at Better Angels.
Awesome. Awesome. And so I'd love to kind of segue into, if it's okay with you, just
Of
marketing
course.
in general today, because you are actively playing the game. And, I've just been listening and reading a lot about what's going on from, a B2C, B2B perspective on just customer acquisition strategies and how difficult it is, as a founder to, especially one that might be undercapitalized, that may not be in Silicon Valley, to get mind share, specifically because, ultimately you're competing with ads on Google, right? And, you're competing with developers that, can out feature you at any given time. So how do you think about, on the first, we'll go to the B2B side and then we'll go on the B2C side, really like being able to get in the ring, right? And be able to actually, how do you to think about that when you're actually in a market that is competitive?
It is ever more crowded out there, specifically in B2B and specifically in B2B software. It is insanely noisy in just about every space
Sure.
in B2B software. That said, I'm still a huge believer in I'm a huge believer in content marketing, because I think that if you create the content and the information that your target customer is looking for, I think you can bring them to you. So being a subject matter expert, basically, or your company being a subject matter expert in a particular area, I think that's extraordinarily important. I think that showing your value by, and this is, I don't have a single company that doesn't start its sales cycle and its revenue momentum without a number of pilots and a number of trials and a number of very early customers and very early champions. And then those champions can be kind of your best acquisition tool going forward, particularly in B2B, because if there's one thing that has never changed in business to business, it's that somebody who is looking for a solution is going to want to know if their competitors are what solution their competitors are using. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at your tool and I see that my biggest competitor, who I see coming up on my tail most quickly, is using you, of course that's going to pique my curiosity, right? I say often about people's websites that in business to business, the first thing that somebody's going to be struck by is just look, feel, brand, impact, because that's our first experience of any brand in any circumstance whatsoever. And probably the second thing that somebody's going to go look, a potential customer is going to go look for, is your client list, right? Who are
Mm-hmm.
you selling to? There's a reason why everybody has those logos front and center. And that says a lot. It is noisy, noisy, noisy out there, but if you can get some advanced guard customers and then demonstrate success for those advanced guard customers and then show that success to your next potential customers, that starts the train rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on the noise. I'm specifically in my search. I was listening to actually Bill Gurley at a conference this year, and he said that like the hardest thing about venture is just not competition between venture firms, but just his portfolio being competition, just about how much ad dollars are going in. And for me now, it's all vertical SaaS all the time, right? I just it has to be built by for, right? That's not that. Because at least you have some kind of repeatability on a sales and marketing motion. You'll have some repeatability, hopefully, on product market fit, because you're not trying to reinvent, the sales talk about, implementing your software. So, what about on the
I
B2C
agree. The
side?
horizontal approach of being everything to everyone it just doesn't work. Does not work anymore.
You have to save, you have to save that for, the big guys in Silicon Valley, right?
Or one day you might be the big guys in Silicon Valley and then you can, spread the riches. But yes, focus is so important in early stage.
So what about on the B2C side?
The B2C side is much more Wild West. I do still, again, as I said earlier in the podcast, I caution people to remember that in both cases, you're still selling to a human being. But the B2C side is really where brand begins to shine and where you are so challenged to show your value and your differentiation. And again, it is ever noisier out there, even in B2C, because of the domination of cheap social media advertising, search, right? The ever increasing availability of information to your desired customer. They're spoiled for choice.
It's worse because you can't
road to show that you're different.
Right, and you can't afford a sales force with B2C, right? And you can't, and you can't charge as much. So
you have to find, what is your differentiator going to be, right? And we've seen that the companies that succeed in direct to consumer have come up with, usually they found a problem that hasn't been well solved. So Warby Parker is a good example in the sense of, I think that they early on learned to speak to their customer in a way that the optical industry had never spoken to its customer before, even though it's this intensely personal thing, right? What you put on your face and what helps you, see more clearly. Glasses are pretty essential for people who wear them. And yet it was a fairly generic, dispassionate, not so personal business. And Warby Parker said, no, we'll you don't even have to necessarily leave the comfort of your home. And that really resonated with people, and they liked the vibe of the brand and the way that the brand spoke to them. And I think that was early on in direct to consumer. And today that's not enough, because every direct to consumer brand has this kind of friendly, we're built to serve you, we're going to make it super convenient for you approach. And now you have to rise above that yet again. So it is challenging. It is challenging, but you find the gap in the marketplace.
Yeah. And I just think, to your point, content, nothing but content is really one of the main big moats you can actually have, because
yes,
you'll see, there's just so many examples. Kim Kardashian is raising a private equity fund. It's unbelievable. But she'll throw a direct to consumer apparel brand, and it's $3.5 billion. Like a third of the country follows her on Instagram. That stuff matters.
It's a huge, huge broadcast range that she has, right? All she has to do, anything that she says is going to garner attention, and that gives you a platform to launch any number of things. And that has really, I think in influencer marketing is by now, it's an old discipline, but influencers in the sense of anybody who is influential, that those platforms remain one of the best ways to reach the audience that you want to reach. You just have to
Hmm.
figure out who those influencers are. And it's why we went from macro influencers to micro influencers to what people are now calling nano influencers, right? Because
Yeah.
you,
I'm a
it's
nano influencer. Whatever's smaller than nano influencer, that's what I am.
I should know my Greek well enough to be able to pull that one out of my hat, but I don't have it today.
Yeah. Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you so much for jumping on the show. Couple canned questions, if I may. What is your favorite book?
Ooh, now or forever?
Doesn't matter. First thing that comes to mind.
I'm a really big fan of Letelier's The Anomaly that came out a couple years ago in France, and then came out last year in the United States. That's a fantastic book for now. Book for the ages. I'm going to be horribly unoriginal and go with Great Expectations.
Nice. What about marketing books that stand the test of time and aren't just flashes in the pan?
Emotional Branding by my late mentor, Mark Gobet. That's a classic. Um, Ogilvy on Advertising, even an older classic, and yet the philosophies there still hold true. Pip Coburn's book on basically how to solve perceived pain of adoption versus perceived crisis of need. That's a marketing book that has stayed with me pretty much forever. Those are my favorites. One of the things that I always say about marketing, because I talk to a lot of marketers who become investors or they become CEOs or they've gotten really lucky and retired some beautiful spot, and I speak to them enviously and they say, oh, I can't really talk about marketing because I haven't been in it for so long. I don't really know how it works. And while the digital tools do change on almost a daily basis, it is crazy how that does evolve and change, and you need to work very, very hard to be current. The basic principles, of how to build a brand and how to speak to a customer and how to go out and find that customer and acquire that customer. And then, very important, people forget this, retain that customer so that you don't need to reacquire them. There's the basic tenets of brand marketing and of how to build a successful ad campaign. Those things, they haven't changed in literal millennia. You can look at how people used to build businesses in ancient societies, and some of those tenets still hold true today. So it doesn't actually, the tools change, the philosophy remains the same.
Awesome.
The song remains the same.
Yeah, the song remains the same. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the Capital Stack. We are on every Tuesday. A new episode gets dropped on every platform: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you like it, please subscribe, like it, share with a friend, cancel me, do whatever. Hopefully, everyone a great day, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.